Okay, so welcome back to the GenAI Ops podcast. Today we're joined by Glenn Robinson, who is the National Technology Officer for Microsoft and also the founder of the Centre for GenAIOps. So we all know each other very well from the event in the House of Lords. But Glenn, look, tell us, why did you start the Centre for GenAIOps?
Yeah, look, obviously it's great to be here and super appreciated to be invited on the podcast today. Um, it was so interesting, like thinking back now, like where we are today with Gen AI, but then looking back, it wasn't that long ago where I remember sitting there with Harrison and a few other folk in a room, and we were looking at the technology as it was at that point in the stage of maturity. And I remember I made quite a bold statement at the time. I think I'd just keynoted at the AI summit, and I thought I'll try and really capture people's imagination. And I said, look, I believe that generative AI will be the most transformative technology of our lifetime. And then I went on to explain why I believe the effect this technology will have. And when I repeated that to Harrison, I think we both sort of looked at each other and thought this is a bit akin to what happened with or that caused the creation of things like DevOps, like this quite significant technology shifts that meant very different practices, very different tools and technologies, different ways to manage risk, different way of doing pretty much everything to how it was done before. So, with cloud and automated development processes and pipelines. We saw, CI/CD. We saw a whole bunch of new tools that didn't really exist before. Cloud really sort of enabled a lot of that to happen. And then with that, we saw DevOps, which is like a way to do a thing that developers followed. And I said, don't you feel that what we need today is DevOps, but for Gen AI? We need ways of doing things, ways of structuring, departments, technical capabilities, organizations, building applications, managing risk. We need all of that, but it's going to be different because this technology is going to be so pervasive and it's going to affect everything and it's nuanced. So what we have today is not sufficient. But also I said that if I look at the journeys, these transformative journeys we've been on before, they've taken a long time to mature those best practices. And if I looked at the way that we've achieved those best practices, for me, it was the big communities back in the day, books like the Phoenix Project and Gene Kim, and suddenly you go to these conferences and all these people that are really keen to learn, but they're also super keen to contribute, like their learnings from doing this on the front line. And I said, well, why wait? Why wouldn't we be the ones to start the community, this sort of focal point for similarly minded people with similar challenges, and collectively, this isn't about us preaching because we just don't know the answers, but it's about creating this community where others can bring those best practices, share them, people test them, refine them, improve them, and continually give back to the broader community. And we're all super excited about playing a small role in that, and sort of delighted really when we sort of roll forward where we are today. We have an amazing group of ambassadors out there doing work on a day-to-day basis, which is massively appreciated. We've got bodies of knowledge that we've managed to build and now publish, things like the manifesto, and we're starting. So we're following in a similar footsteps to how it's been done before. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, but we're capturing net new information, which I think is of really high value. And I'm out talking to businesses all the time and pointing them back towards it. And if you want to be part of something and learn about how this is being done in the wild, then go here, go to the Centre for GenAIOps, and we get great feedback. People think it's a value and they're sort of super excited about what's possible in the future as well. So yeah, I think the idea become a reality, and now we're in the throes of actual doing it, and it's just great to see.
Great. Yes, and I mean Jamie and I are both very, very happy to be those ambassadors as well. So that's great. So Jamie, over to you. What's the first manifesto point that we need to go over?
Yeah, so starting off today, we're discussing the fourth point. We interoperate progressively and expand responsibly by aligning each integration with wider goals to drive sustainable growth without overwhelming our systems or teams. So, from my sort of lens, when we've been onboarding and working with enterprise customers with large bid teams, and we have started that they are essentially onboarding for our software. We have really felt the importance of this point in terms of doing it progressively, and really taking your time for the whole change management piece of helping the in my domain, the bid writers understand the technology. Glenn, from your perspective, obviously working at Microsoft, also your lens from Tramlines, why do you think this is such an important point to be able to adopt the technology in the most effective way?
Yeah, completely. And again, there's no need to invent the wheel here. So when I work with these executives and these large organizations, and they sort of say, they're like sometimes rabbits in headlights. They're like, we just don't know what to do. And I have to remind them, I'm like, you really do, because you've been here before. And when you've adopted any new technology, let's just go back to cloud. That's probably the biggest and most pervasive one that I draw a parallel to. It's the one that I've played quite a role in all, most of my life. And I'm like, how did you do that? Like, how did you think about that problem? And was the technology the problem? Or was it more the people in your organization and the structure of it? And every time they go, oh, it's the people, right? So your point around change management is the lens I tend to use to talk about this manifesto point. I was like, great, look, this technology will evolve. It's maturing at such a pace. It's changing. It's improving, etc. So whatever perception you have of it today is not going to be right tomorrow. So whatever you put in place today will probably need to look different and change tomorrow. So how do you prepare an organization for almost constant change? Because what you'll find is most people in a business will not be comfortable in those conditions. There'll be a small amount of people who love change. I'm actually one of them. I love it. I'm just like, yeah, bring it, all new all the time is all good. But it can get exhausting for sure, trying to keep up. But most people want structure. That's their comfort zone. They want strict guidance. They want to know what they can and can't do and how to do something. And so taking them from where they are today into, pretty manually driven processes and ways of doing things, which they've been doing for a long time, to then taking them into a world where agentic processes are executing business operations or customer engagement or citizen interactions, and they're suddenly not feeling like they're in control anymore. And then they worry and they think of all these different risks, and that's not conducive to positive change. That's going to get people pushing back. That's going to get people moving slowly. That's going to get people actually what we saw back in cloud, and we are seeing it again now, what we used to call FUD, so fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Loads of that. It was either the competitors against, let's say, big hyperscale. So the traditional IT outsource providers would go, cloud's insecure, cloud is expensive, cloud is all these things. And today we know none of that to be true, and it's proven. And you get a great ROI when done well. You drive massive amounts of agility and innovation when done well. When done well requires the people designing systems in the cloud, operating systems in the cloud to do it well. How do we get them to do it well? You need to onboard, they need to be part of this journey. First and foremost, they have to come in, embrace it, because then they need to make a big investment in terms of time to learn the new skills. And they also need to rewire their brain. Like, they need to then do things differently. Stop doing it this way, start doing it that way. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to find an organization doing that across the whole business all at the same time. So you're going to find people that are going to come in early. And I think this is this progressive and responsible point. Identifying the people that want to, use them to get out in front, to prove the value to the business, to prove that this can be done safely, responsibly, prove that it delivers the value that you expected, or not, and learn from it, and then do it differently the next time. And then what you find is it's just the sort of adoption curves. Then you find the others start to starts to build confidence. So they can see this as the norm. They can see this as improving. They can see that there's some, rails in front of them that they can follow, and they take great comfort in that, and they will start to come on the journey also. And then what you'll find with the laggards is you're always going to find, unfortunately, some people who won't. They will always push back. They'll make a platform for the fact that they're anti-cloud or anti-Gen AI, and and they're going to sort of make themselves almost famous over that. And there's not necessarily something you can do for those people once they've taken that high ground in that respect. But there's a very small number of them, and this is just what we see every single time. So a change management process that recognizes all of that works with different types of people at different stages, understanding how receptive they are to them and what you need to then give them. Some people will go off and learn these skills all by themselves. The next cohort will not likely need something put in front of them, but they'll take the time. The next group of people, you need to mandate that they then go and do these courses and almost force them to do it, although they're not doing it kicking and screaming. It's like when we have to do, I don't know, compliance training or security, like whatever the training, like, oh, here we go, it's that time of the year again, I have to go and do those. It's that sort of mentality that maybe that they're not going to do it kicking and screaming. So that progressively and responsibly. And I think also when you think technically, system to system, you're not just going to put Gen AI across everything day one. Different data quality in those different data sets is going to affect how Gen AI is able to provide an accurate and trustworthy response. So there's going to be work to be done. So identifying the quality of those data sets, the veracity of those data sets, really important. So again, you work through systematically where you've got high confidence in those data sets. You're probably going to start in those places where the structure and everything is conducive to very optimal Gen AI consumption of that data. Then you got all the downstream and long tail stuff that you're going to sort of maybe get to where it will add value, where it will ground the model with information that provide increased quality and veracity in its responses. So I think that's sort of how I feel about this manifesto point, is sort of taking that pragmatic view on it. But again, I'd always go back to where I started with this. Business, almost every business I work with, unless they've only just been formed in the last few years, I tend to work in enterprise and big businesses. They've all been around for a long time. They've all done this before, and yet they don't take those lessons from the past, and they're not necessarily always applying them now. And I really, for anyone who's listening, you've probably been here, you've done it. Think back to how you did it before. Take those lessons, apply them now, and you're gonna be in pretty safe hands. And then obviously we provide guidance and all sorts of best practices around how to do this as well, because it is nuanced. But yeah, lessons from the past.
And how would you say I suppose, because I wasn't really, I was too young when I was around the
really old now. That's not fair.
How would you say the sort of community sharing aspect is in the sort of right now in this day and age with generative AI compared to the sort of DevOps days? Obviously, you do have a lot more Gen AI information, which does muddy the waters as such. But would you say there's any sort of cultural differences between this period and the last periods, or any general changes?
Yeah, cultural differences. I don't know. I think mostly it's people with sort of similar mindsets, those sort of more pioneering, exploratory mindsets that are, I don't know, maybe you're better at answering that question. I mean, I'm sort of, the reasons you're here, I'm assuming, is because, you are breaking boundaries, you're taking new technology, you're making sense of it and applying it in very specific business contexts. I think other people are waiting for it to be given to them, and they will use it, and they'll use it to great effect. And, if I look back to those days, I mean, I remember going to some of those DevOps conferences, and there would be like 20 of us. You'd have like 5 pizzas and a cake of beer, and that would do, right? That would be all of it. And then you see where that got to, like global conferences, tens of thousands of people in Vegas, and multi-day events, like absolute craziness. And they're the people just there on the receiving end, broadcast to me, I will take it. So I would sort of envisage we're going to do similar. I think we're still very much at that stage where it's a handful of pizzas and a case of beer, where where a group of very progressively minded individuals are sat in the same, and obviously we do some of these, many of these meetings virtually now because we have to, because our small community is global, and we're still very at those early stages, but I think that the people are all similarly minded. I think we'll see when this comes of age, when people are actually willing just to come and sit in a room and listen to what we've got to say and go away and feel satisfied. They haven't had to define and shape. They just come to learn and take it away and apply it. I think that's still to come, but I can't see that being too far off, because this technology just seems to be moving quicker in terms of maturity than anything I've really seen before. And there's really good reasons for that too. If we just touch on that quickly, like, why is that the case? If we took DevOps as a great parallel and example, the people involved in that are IT engineers of certain different disciplines, but mostly quite a narrow group of people. If you look at GenAI and where it started, it's got massive consumer-wide, everybody adoption from day one. People are using, whether it's Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever your pick your poison is, people are using it on a day-to-day basis, and it's captured everyone's imagination really quickly. And I think suddenly we've got a much broader community. And also, actually going on maybe shortly onto our next manifesto point, when I look at businesses, all the time, in fact, I'm not sat in front of technical senior stakeholders, not just. It's now right across the business, like marketing officers, risk officers, financial officers, HR officers, like name your 3-letter acronym for a senior leadership team member, and they're sat around that table with an interest in GenAI, going, how's it going to affect my business? How do I think about recruiting? How do I think about skilling? How do I think about well-being? Like, how do I think about the economics of our business? How do I think about operational delivery and performance? Everyone is affected by this. So, yeah, similarly, before we've had a very small relatively, but still big communities around these technology transformations. This one is just everywhere. It's everyone all the time. And I think, therefore, this is, I do sometimes think that when we think tens of thousands of people in Vegas, GenAI has got the hundreds of thousands of people global type, community event that could happen in the future. And I think it could easily reach that sort of scale because of the level of interest in it.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, I mean, just to go back to your original point around training, Centre for GenAIOps is now doing seminars and training and events for people who are interested in learning more about it and understanding it better. What you said around kind of the attitude and people turning up and everything is really interesting. Because about 7 years ago, we started a small group back when I lived in Wales called AI Wales, ironically. And when we started that, we thought, right, we'll have someone come once a month and they will talk about AI and give talks about what they're researching. And this is obviously before generative AI was really a thing, certainly in the mainstream world. There were a couple of geeks like us that were kind of researching it and didn't really have any real use for it, but just found it kind of fun on GPT-1, which was a hell of a long time ago. But we started off and there was maybe 7 or 8 people coming. And Artemis, my main company, was sponsoring it, and it was right. Okay, we'll get 2 pizzas and some beer. And by the end of it, 3 years later, 4 years later, we had 4,000 members on the group. There was probably close to 100 people turning up every single time. We had Lawrence Moroney, who's a prolific kind of person in the AI world. He was very, very high up at Google, done most of the online kind of e-learning AI courses with Andrew Ng, which I'm sure you're both very familiar with as well. And it just ballooned. And now, I mean, I haven't been part of it for the last 3 years because I moved away to sunny Gibraltar. But now it's got like 6,000 members. They're doing talks in 3 different locations now just to try and segregate the actual amount of people that turn up and want to listen. And I think GenAI was really quite a big part in doing that, because it brought the use of AI, certainly with ChatGPT, as a Hall of Famer, should we say, for making people realise how useful this stuff is it really brought the use of AI down to the common man and the common worker, and across to other sectors. Like you say, marketing ended up being interested in using it, and actually it benefits all the different parts of the business rather than just the tech guys doing some stuff to make their lives easier. And the fact that it doesn't require you to actually have to build it yourself, but again, creates that ease of access, lowers those barriers to entry, and really allows people to do it. So yeah, I mean, totally agree. I think,
and there is just the scale of it is, as you said, Glenn. It is just massive. Like one of my dad's friends recently made redundant, and he said that he's just going to be spending the next 3 months just upskilling and learning about AI, because he doesn't feel like he'll be able to compete with those younger than him if he isn't essentially doing that. And I just think that because everyone I believe it's going to require a almost fundamental shift of the skill sets that we value as, I suppose, people working and employers, etc. Much more towards agency for people and independence and autonomy, and with AI now almost democratizing intelligence and information being so widely accessible, it does essentially mean that everyone can be so much more valuable and deliver so much more value than they originally could, because you just have this access to this super powerful, intelligent computer brain, which just has such large potential. However, with that potential, there is obviously the great sort of risk that it does have, leading into the next point is promoting governance and compliance by upholding strong governance with clear policies and safeguards to ensure our systems are reliable and compliant. Obviously, there are dangers to this technology. Glenn, what are your rough thoughts on, or loose thoughts on this point?
Yeah. If I may, just a quick comment on something you said before, because I think it's such an important point that you and Toby both raised. It's those with the skills and those without the skills to use this technology. I did an executive leadership workshop with a cohort of senior leaders from civil service a couple of weeks ago, and they asked a similar question, and it was almost asked in a, how do we enable other people in the business to learn these skills? And I was like, hang on, what about you? Like, what are you doing about these skills? And they were like, well, they saw it as a tool that people would use in the business to do their jobs better. I said, what about your job? Right. And I said, imagine this world, right? You're going head to head for the next role. Let's say it's permanent secretary for a big government department. Imagine there's someone going for that role who is an expert in using GenAI. And then all the things you just said, right? They're going to have access to rich information. They're going to have these amazing technology, supercomputers able to do analysis, inference, bring back and enrich their thinking with information that others just don't have. And when you're making decisions, budgeting decisions, policy decisions, or whatever in government, if you're doing that job, if you're doing that with this system, you're going to be better at doing that job than someone who's not. And you could see the air going out the room as they'll realise that, their roles at all levels in the organisation are going to change dramatically. This isn't just for other people; it's for everybody. And if you're not part of that, the risk to you is not insignificant when you're up against people who have invested the time in terms of employment, net new role, promotion, whatever that is. And And then, Jamie, you mentioned about how the changing way we're thinking about roles in businesses. And again, I just don't think people are necessarily thinking about this in the right way. I'll give it two quick examples. One, working with a large organization, 600 open roles currently that they're looking to recruit for. It's a big organization. They haven't been able to recruit for most of these roles because they're a public sector organization. The pay conditions, whatever, is not, it's not an attractive place necessarily that people are gravitating towards. So they said, Glenn, we need an AI system that's going to go and find the candidates who would do these roles. So we need all sorts of information about roles they've done before, where they might be more enticed by our sort of culture and the workplace and the environment and frankly the pay conditions that we're offering. And I was like, what? I was like, no, don't do that. I was like, right, you've tried for months in many cases to try and attract people to this role. And frankly, for most of the tasks that you're asking people to do, people just don't want to do that for that money. But what about a digital worker? What about an agent that will do those tasks for you? So they went with, we've got horses, we want faster horses. And I went, no, you need a car, right? Very different way, right? Let's take all those job specs. Let's go through them all. Let's break it all down to all the different common tasks. And the ones that keep appearing, we'll create agents for. And we'll strip all those tasks out of those job specs. And then we'll look at what's left. Higher value roles in a business, a smaller number of them, higher pay, better work satisfaction, etc., etc. Go and do that. And they were like, oh, that's a great idea. But it's just like people were thinking sort of incrementally. They weren't really thinking, I don't know, maybe as I'd think about the challenge, which is something completely more disruptive and transformative, which is what this technology allows us to do. I will answer your other question in a minute, but just a point on how we're thinking about, because I think this is quite interesting. Like Microsoft has 240 odd thousand people working here. We have 60,000 developers. We also have a tool, GitHub Copilot, that consistently writes better code, secure code, production grade code, goes into production. Something like 34% of our code is currently written by GitHub Copilot that reaches production. Right, it's massive. And all our analysis shows that GitHub generally, mostly, writes better code than any of our engineers can or do. And it writes it consistently. And it draws on all the security best practices, so we get security written code, etc., etc. So we're thinking about, well, this trend is only going to improve. It's only going one direction. As we generate more code and as we fine tune and as we steer the GenAI, less requirement for software engineers to write software. And we've got 60,000 of them working for us. So how do we think about this? Like a quarter of our business, that massive population, how do we think about that in terms of how we're going to look for talent? What talent do we need? What tasks they need to perform? And that's a really fundamental question every business should be thinking about themselves right now. We've done that and we thought, well, if we think about a software engineering profession, what we want them to do is to solve for difficult problems using the appropriate digital technologies. It just so happens at the moment that software engineers then have to go and write the code because those things don't exist. Well, that last part of the process, we can get generative AI to write code. So we're thinking these higher value tasks of looking at problem statements, understanding problems, and thinking about a digital solution to that problem, and then getting a machine to go and write the bits, do the integrations, connect to the right systems, and then go and execute and do whatever. Well, that's great, right? Because then we've got people, really intelligent people, who are solving vastly more problems, adding more value to our business. We're creating all this efficiency and we're just moving up the value chain. And that's what we've seen happen before. And that's what we're going to see happen again. So it's just something we're ideating around. But again, we're just thinking drastically differently to how you would do normally about some of these challenges around how do we attract more software engineers. Well, we want them to look very different. Creative thinking, critical thinking skills are going to be more important. Can you write in .NET? So back to your question about that manifesto point, with great power comes great responsibility and all that. I mean, that's exactly what this is, right? It's literally that Peter Parker moment of, wow, this stuff, this technology, it's pervasive. It's going to be in every part of our business. It's going to run big parts of many organizations. It's going to be a digital workforce of the future. It's going to sit with us in our teams and be part of, they're going to literally be these agents that are just like another member of our team that perform functions and collaborate with us and do things alongside us. And when doing all that, we have guardrails around our employees. We think about the values of the business. We tell them, we have employment contracts which define what they can and can't do. We have, employee behaviour sort of guidance as well. Like, we expect to treat each other with respect and all those good things. Well, we're going to want these systems to behave in very similar ways. We don't want them to swear at us or say things that are offensive, and that could be internally or it could be externally to customers. We want them to come armed with facts, not just made up stuff. So we want to make sure that what the information that they're using is trustworthy, and that when they provide information back to us, that they've gone and validated that. All these different checks and balances that we have business processes around people for, we need to implement with GenAI. And the great news is that there are structures and ways and means that we can create transparency and observability and all that good stuff. And then we can have organizational governance processes where we have things like human in the loop, where the person is also doing those checks and balances on those more sort of high risk scenarios. And I think that's, for me, that is the approach. It's the right approach, because I talk about the democratization of innovation a lot. And for me, that's really one of the big transformative shifts that we're seeing here. Generative AI, as you said earlier, Jamie, is putting an incredible amount of power into everybody's hands, and they're able to do things that they couldn't possibly even dream of doing before. Intelligence they're able to garner, information they're able to use to make better decisions. They get systems to go and do incredible stuff. Like with natural language, you'll go and write the code, query a discrete data set, and come back with all sorts of notes. I haven't had to write that code. I didn't need those skills. I mean, it's democratizing all of that. But I talk about this under the banner of democratization of innovation. People have to go and think differently about problems, and to innovate, but get a machine to do all the heavy lifting for them. And that's a lot of power to put into everybody's hands. And we can't have everyone running out there doing it indiscriminately. We can't have everyone doing that and exposing sensitive data, all those risks that we just know could be apparent if this wasn't done in a controlled way. And then there's going to be things that organizations, just from a cultural value perspective, just don't want to see happen. And Microsoft has those. Like, for example, we think, privacy is a human right, is something we sort of live and die by. So can our AI technologies be used to identify through facial recognition an individual? No. We allow businesses to do that in aggregate. There are people, an amount of people in a place, but we can't say Glenn is sat in a room at this address at this exact moment in time. That's an invasion of my privacy. And yet that scenario for police forces, intelligence, is of really high value. But because of the values of our business, that's not a use case we allow. We put legal controls and we put technical controls to identify when that could be happening, and obviously stop it if someone's misusing our system as well. And all organizations are going to have different, if you call it ethics, we tend to call this a responsible AI standard that we have, and set of principles that we adhere to, and a set of values that they align to. Organizations can have different values, different principles, and they're going to set up these different guardrails to suggest what can and can't happen. And I think what we're seeing now is a fabulous amount of maturity in those technical controls that organizations can employ. And that's great, because that's building confidence that the right things are going to happen and the wrong things are going to be identified and stopped very early on. I think the legal and regulatory space which comes with this, as ever, is coming slowly. and if at all. So we've seen PACE in Europe, AI Act. They're sort of, I think they're, put that out there. They're seeing the impact of that right now, and it's having economic impacts. It's changing the attitudes to investment in Europe. It's changing attitudes to organisations thinking about where they're going to start new businesses. Should we do it in Europe? This is quite restrictive potentially, and maybe we want a bit more of a liberal regime where we can, because we're not doing anything that's going to harm anyone or cause any problems here, but still there's reporting overhead that we have to adhere to. It's just operational overhead. So actually seeing organisations think about the UK as a space, because the UK government have gone through a similar process of looking at government, like what do we want to regulate and legislate for and make sure it doesn't happen. Well, the creation of bioweapons was a big theme at the AI Safety Summit last year. Great. No one wants to see that. Just doesn't happen on our watch, right? So they're going to legislate for that. But then there's a massive long tail of innovation that they absolutely want to see happen. Healthcare, safety, education, like business innovation, all up, every industry. Let's go, right? We want to create the conditions for that happens. And I think businesses with global economics the way they are, all the contexts we're working in today, businesses want to just get on and be responsible for themselves. They want to, where they can, they want to move at pace, but they will want to put checks and balances. They will want to sort of police themselves. So I think these governance frameworks are now mature enough that organizations are just adopting them. Like I say, Microsoft has a responsible AI standard that we just see people use as a blueprint that they use. There's an operating model, there's a structure, there's a business process we can follow. There's questions we can ask. Should we do a thing? Shouldn't we do a thing? How do we measure that? How do we make a decision around that? And then they do. And that's great. So I think this is a really important point. It's a part of the journey. It's a part of the change management process. Again, it's absolutely essential. Otherwise, it's just going to be the Wild West out there. And that's just going to, again, like the people casting shadow on generative AI. We use all those examples of where it's done poorly to tell everyone else they shouldn't be doing it at all, which is just wrong. It's doing it the right way is where the value is going to be. And yeah, doing it, with the appropriate governance and compliance in place is the way to do it right.
Yeah, it is that fine balance of balancing the innovation with the risk and regulation. I was listening to like a interview of like Peter Thiel yesterday, who was he's of the opinion that since like the last 50 years we've not had any significant real innovation, and that we're moving too slow. But then again, you have all of the dangers of AI, which it sort of can present, where you don't have to sort of think too far ahead to understand where it could go wrong through even some of the examples that you gave, Glenn. So yeah, it's definitely like a super, I find it super interesting topic, and I'm sure it's something which there will be lots of learning and lots of mistakes probably made along the way through different businesses and governments, and getting that balance right. But all super cool points. So yeah, I think that's pretty much coming up to time. So massive thank you for Glenn for his time. Really appreciate it. It was a great discussion. And yeah, join us in the next podcast. Any closing remarks, guys?
Yeah, look, just a massive thanks, right? I mean, firstly, just again, super appreciative of the work that you guys do for the Centre for GenAIOps as ambassadors. I think it's just amazing to see the progress that we're making there. I think this podcast is another great example of how you're getting the word out and spreading these sort of best practices and insight and thought leadership. So it's just fantastic. Obviously, anyone who's listening, would certainly encourage you to go to our website, have a look at the manifesto, engage with the community, get involved. Like, we're looking for similarly minded people to help us drive forward this maturity. So this absolutely is going to take a village, and that's a global village as well. So a few of us that do it today, always looking for more interested minds to come and join us on this journey. So but it's been great to join you. I really appreciate the conversation, and just carry on the good work.
And we need to get another pizza, beer and cake event sorted, I think.
Yeah.